Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining for another podcast, webinar, however you're listening to this. Today, we are closing out Limb Loss and Limb Difference Awareness Month, strong with three individuals that are come from a variety of walks of life, both upper and lower limb difference. And we'll be hearing from them in terms of their journey, their experience with using and not using prosthetic devices. So we invite you to ask questions, anything that you feel like sharing a comment on, but we'll be jumping into that shortly. Before we do, just a few seconds on calibration marketing. It was started with the goal of helping smaller entities within the O&P community, clinics, businesses that don't have the capacity to bring on a full-time marketing person or department, but still need that support, whether it be through content creation, managing websites, creating collateral, things like that. The need is out there to tell these various stories about users that come through these clinics or through the great practitioners that work in them. So that's what we're all about, closing up that gap and offering these services on a part-time contract project basis, whatever makes the most sense to the particular business or entity that needs that kind of support. But without further ado, I will invite Paul Kent onto this webinar. Paul, if you could share a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your journey, things like that, and then we'll hop into further details a little bit later. But thanks for joining today.
Great. Thanks, Linda. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here. I am a below-the-knee bilateral amputee that occurred in December of 2020 by my participating in a clinical surgical research study out of the Mass General Brigham, Dr. Matt Carty, who performed what is now known as the Ewing amputation.
Okay.
I joined the amputee community as a result of a 10-year chronic health crisis that was a derivative of a genetic neuropathy that presented in me about 15 years ago, completely different from my siblings in that I almost pursued like a diabetic wound pathway, but I was not diabetic.
Interesting.
So we're still sorting out what was underneath that that change in presentation, if you will. It used to be just loss of sensation, and then I started to be, like I said, a wound issue that put my life at risk many times through infections.
Okay.
So I became the first, what they call non-traumatic, in the sense that I didn't have a diagnosis or an accident or some other sort of immediate trauma. And I voluntarily walked into the program and the surgery. It's been quite the journey since. The easiest way to say how great it's been, because I refer to that as my gift, is the fact that since that surgery, I have not been hospitalized, been on medicine, or had a surgery for the first time in 15 years.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm sure it was not an easy decision at the time, but now.
Well, it was a lot easier than many think, given that the circumstance, because if I didn't, I would more than likely have died from an infection because I was growing resistant to them. I was having them more frequently, and it was becoming more prolonged from an acute perspective. So it wasn't too bad. And in fact, I think it's been the best decision I've made in the sense of the quality of life that I've had since then. I was very compromised for a decade, and now that I've undergone that and become an amputee and gone through the whole prosthetic fitting and nuances of different feet and different things, it's been nothing but a great journey. It's been an adventurous, healthy, active journey that I hadn't had for the prior decades. So
yeah, you have just a couple marathons under your belt since then.
Just got done with the third one, which, as we were talking before, I walked this year with a paraplegic, which was very, very inspiring. It took us quite a long time, and that was a new experience of being in my prosthetics, walking, as opposed to using my running prosthetics to run in a shorter amount of time. So it was kind of an interesting kind of contrast of experiences.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that. So next we have Jonathan Cowley, who I know from my prior life at OSER. We've crossed paths. He's a power user of upper limb prosthetics. So Jonathan, take the floor, share a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of how you ended up in this industry, in this market with this need.
Well, good morning, Linda. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm your token Brit on this call today. Obviously, I've been out here now in the US since 2003. I live in California, and I was diagnosed back in January 2014 with a very rare cancer, epithelioid sarcoma, and it presents itself as a lump in my right palm, and that was nobody really knew what it was. It looked like just a bump, and my doctor at the time said to me I wouldn't worry about it. Everybody get lumps and bumps. 99.8% of bumps are benign, but 0.2% aren't, and I was the unlucky 0.2%. So in March of 2014, I elected to have my right hand amputated after many failed surgeries, which resulted in the disease still being there. They still found evidence of it. So I elected to have my hand amputated. I was very lucky. I actually had a world famous hand doctor based at UCLA, Dr. Cody Azari, who was with me throughout my journey. And he was the one who first educated me about prosthesis and gave me hope. Because obviously at the time I thought that my life was coming to an end. I was losing my hand, that everything was done. But he basically showed me and educated me that my life would be different, but I would still be able to run a regular life. That's where I am today. I am currently using a upper limb prosthesis. I use a iLimb, which you'll be familiar with. We have a number of adaptive devices as well that I utilize. My job is I'm a regional director for British Airways, so I travel a lot, and I manage multiple airports around the United States. But as you can imagine, I have lots of interesting engagements with passengers who frequently ask me if they can give me a hand. Can I give you a hand? Which I explained to them would be very useful if they could give me a hand. But my life is very normal. I felt that when I got my prosthesis, I felt like I got my hand back. I felt like I was whole again. I'm very I love going and talking to people at conferences, universities, schools, educating, especially children, because obviously a lot of children who are afflicted by amputations, they want to see that there's something really cool out there, and that there is life beyond the amputation, which there absolutely is. But it's really great to be here, and I look forward to answering any questions that people may have.
Yeah, and I know you and I have talked about this previously, that your road to feeling whole again was also not very easy. You had to seek out different clinicians, and for a while there, which I think is the reality for many, especially in upper limb, and the rejection rates being so high, many are fit with a device that they think that they want, and then it ends up not working out for them, not necessarily because of that device, but because the socket fit or the OT support wasn't there. And so it just lives in a closet somewhere. And you just feel like, well, what was all of that for if I can't utilize this thing that was supposed to make me whole? So I know you had quite a bit of a journey of finding the right clinician to help you.
Well, Linda, I mean, you're right. I mean, one of the things, it was my own fault. I was in such a rush to get a prosthesis that I actually pushed my prosthetist, and he said to me, I wasn't ready. I was still pretty close to my surgery, and he said I needed to allow my residual limb to sort of calm down a bit because it was still swollen. There was edema, etc. but I was insistent. I wanted my prosthesis, and of course, exactly what happened was that the prosthesis didn't fit after 2 months because so he was able to adjust it. But also, you know, I was very lucky. I did find a prosthetist that we worked really well together. The fit was perfect. So I'm really happy with what I have right now. But the start was probably my own fault by trying to rush it a little bit. And I think, you know, you have to give it time.
But they always talk about that golden period, right? You got to get that prosthesis on so that you can start to rewire your brain and make sure that you can continue to function in an ideal scenario. And now people also, if they listen to podcasts and audiobooks, they may also know who does some of the wording behind that. So if you're still doing that.
I that's my little side gig. I do audiobooks, so I've done over 120 now. But that's why I have to maintain the British accent. So
yes, so you have to go home every once in a while.
There you go. Absolutely. Lovely to be here, and thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, for sure. And certainly not least, we have Mike Boland, who is here for the jokes. And many of you have likely seen him. I think we came across each other at some point last year. And then since then, you've blown up and, you know, have been able to share your insights and your story, as well as some of the ways that you are adapting to and have been for your entire life. In terms of getting stuff done around the house and working out and things like that. And obviously as a congenital prosthetic non-user for most of the time, you have a bit of a different spin on things, which is, I think, very in line with what a lot of cases are for people.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, first of all. And one of the things I'll say is, even though I no longer wear a prosthetic, I am 100% behind them. So I will say that. And I did wear a prosthetic for many years of my life, but I was born with one hand, and I've enjoyed it. I love it. I was born without a right hand. It's opened up a lot of doors for me. I played Danny in the Trial of Billy Jack, and back in the day when I was a child actor. I was the first limb loss person on the Professional Bowlers Tour. I did that for a while. Then I went to corporate America, a billion-dollar organization, and ran our e-business, our digital marketing, and our customer experience for different times. And then through my own cancer journey, I decided to leave corporate America and try to get back to the limb loss community however I could. So I have a podcast called We're Not Stumped, where I tell other people's stories. I'm just the host. I'm pretty quiet on that. It's weird.
Not a good one.
Well, thank you. You were a great guest. So that always helps when we have great guests. So I'm not used to speaking this much, but I do appreciate it. But I do comedy, and I have a one-man show that I travel around doing. So it's been for me personally, if it wasn't for my parents, I'm sure that things would have been different. I've met people just like me that the journeys are much different, but it's not something that I would ever change. And I really enjoy the way I am.
Well, and I think that's a good segue in terms of what are the things that you wish you knew in your younger self or prior to amputation. Paul, obviously you have a very interesting scenario where maybe you would have elected to have these surgeries much earlier on. Jonathan, you didn't know what you didn't know because it was such a surprising situation. And Mike, you love who you are, and you're thriving in whatever scenario you're put in. So if you could share, for whoever may be listening, whether it be that they've experienced trauma through limb and it's resulted in limb loss, or they have somebody that they know that was born limb different. What are your kind of words of encouragement or words to the wise, things to look out for, things you wish you knew, whether it be about the prosthetic market and options or just the journey itself?
I want to make sure, is that from me?
All of you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'll say is the other gentleman really hit a lot of it, and I really like that. I've learned through the podcast that there is another side. Now, I may not have had another side because I was born like this, but the other gentlemen I can tell are thriving and doing great. And I think a lot through the journeys, and they can speak certainly better than I can, but through my guests, I've learned that there's a time where you question what's next for you. And I like to see the two gentlemen that are on here exemplifying what is next, and what is next is endless possibilities.
Well, and to echo that, it's interesting, Linda, you alluded to, I might have decided to do this sooner. Well, I actually did. And this is kind of a commentary on the kind of clinical side of things. I suggested, after a fourth near-death experience in 2018, to my team of doctors that were, caring for me out in California. I'm now in Boston. That we should take these feet off. They're going to kill me. And the response by especially the neurologists who wanted to do more workup and maybe even think about doing things with the brain to fix the problem, their response was to refer me to a psychiatrist, which I did see. And she had read my medical records and agreed with me that made a lot of sense. And then to try to find somebody that would proactively do that was nearly impossible. And then I happened to, no pun intended, trip upon what was going on here in Boston from a clinical research study perspective, and became a participant in that.
Oh yeah, that's a tough road, because no clinician, no surgeon wants to just go for it, because then it's them on the line, right? But what's best, and you've got to advocate.
Yeah, and you do have to that is an important part. I think every person either contemplating it or going through it or whatever, you still have to be your own advocate, and you still have to, you kind of know what's right. And Jonathan alluded to it in his opening commentary, right? That his only downside post amputation was his determination, right? Which is not a bad thing. So no,
Jonathan, thoughts?
Yeah, I would say one of my regrets was that I never documented my journey. It was a bit of a rush, because obviously I had cancer. I was told that my outcome was not looking good. So I think I was very focused on that. However, one of the wonderful experiences that I had came out of it. I had a lady on the end of a phone who was wasn't really a psychologist, but and we've shared this story before, and I think it really had a deep impact on me, and has had similar impacts on other people I've spoken to. And she just said to me, one word of recommendation is write a farewell letter to your hand before your amputation. And I thought that she had lost the plot, basically. And when I asked her for instructions, she said, there aren't any, just write a letter. And that weekend before I had my amputation, I thought about it, and I wrote 12 pages. And basically, it was every memory that came flooding back with my hand, whether it be the day I got my pilot's license, or the day I held my wife's hand when we got married, or when I first held my baby. And at the end of it, I apologized to my hand, but I said, I have to do this. Now, losing a limb is like apparently losing a relative. So I think that is probably the best advice I had at the time, because I felt like I got to say goodbye before my hand went. It's like saying goodbye to your relative before they pass. So that for me was a huge benefit. And I hope that story can help others.
Yeah. It always gives me the shivers, because I think it's, I had never heard that before until you had told me that years ago. Something else that I think comes up a lot is the various options that are out there for folks that may want to use a prosthesis, whether it be for daily use or activity specific. Mike, I know you've created some cool tools to help you with a variety of activities. And obviously it's something that I actually talked about prior to this conversation with Carl Lindborg. He's a CP, primarily focusing on upper limb. And he was saying, somebody created this great widget just to hold a guitar pick. And while we're on the manufacturer side, that's where I come from, right? While we're so focused on trying to market and get these great but super expensive tools out there, there are less expensive options that could help somebody, because it's, when you're talking about 20% of an entire bill, sometimes that may mean $20,000 out of your pocket. So I'm curious to hear from you guys in terms of the tools that have helped you, and to follow that, things that maybe are getting too much excitement that are really not that great. You don't have to name names, but what are the things that you feel are critical to your success every single day? And maybe in some cases, it's not using the thing that everybody talks about all the time. It's something else, especially on the, I think, upper limb side of things. I'm most familiar with my electric hands, and I will represent them, and I think that they're fantastic, but it's another tool. It's a tool in your toolbox. It's just like you need a bunch of different screwdrivers for different screws. What are the things that truly do make a difference and help?
I think it's very interesting. The amputee community in general, the necessity being the mother of invention, right? It plays out daily in the amputee community. Like Mike's ability to create apparatus and devices that help him without a prosthesis. And that's the real challenge in the amputee. It can be overwhelming. I was overwhelmed when I was considering what to do, and then being limited by industry and insurance and regulatory. It doesn't help. It narrows your optionality, right? But there's so much great innovation happening, and I can speak to the lower limb. But
please.
It's just amazing what's going on. Unfortunately, and in fact, I'm helping develop some of that with my partnership with Dr. Hugh Hurrow at MIT.
Yeah.
And I always question, all the researchers in there of why are you creating all this greatness when it can't get to the limb, right? Right now in its current, and it's interesting. It's but I think there's like this, so everybody can move movement and all that. It's starting to get a little bit easier, and there's a greater awareness that's going on now, which is helpful. But I see so many promising things out there, and they're not just all prosthetics. It's elements of them. It's the socket, it's the liners, it's the, you name it. And for me, my biggest focus is socket fitting.
Okay, I was going to ask, what's the game changer among all?
For me as a bilateral, it's like if I'm going to feel like I'm in ski boots that I've been in that are too small for too many hours. You just don't use it, right? It's not painful; it's just discomfort. So I'm very blessed that I've had some great O&P work, and partnerships that have, knock on wood, I haven't had that issue from a socket fit perspective.
That's tremendous, because that is the difference maker oftentimes. But the terminal device is the one that gets blamed because you can't use it effectively, but really it's because you're not able to. So Mike, I'd love to hear about what your take on this is in terms of helpful devices. And I am also curious about what you have used previously and whether you were using those things consistently or just every once in a while for particular tasks.
Well, I have props, so I'm glad you asked that question. First of all, this is my hammer, so I don't need another hammer. I can just hit this. Actually, that hurt my hand. Now I may need something for the hand.
Maybe.
But this is the first prosthetic I ever had, really. And I don't even know if they have these any longer. This was something that, I don't know, I have to look at the camera here. This was a rubberized mitt, basically. And I had a little socket on it, and it was meant to make sure that I knew I had an extra, I don't know, few inches on my arm, so I wasn't poking what ended up being my first prosthetic. I wasn't poking that in my eye. So, just little old things. But as far as nowadays, and I find on a day in, day out basis, I really personally don't need anything other than when I work out. Yeah. And when I work out, I made this device so I can do my curls, my presses, and my bench. And I put my arm in there. I do wear a sock. Again, I don't know how well these are showing up. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. These are literally socks. Exactly. And that's what I use. And I'm able to do pretty much anything because I really think that working out is a key to anyone in our community. I think it helps the mind, body, and soul. So I've always been that way. I've always been in the sports. And I just think that just working out is important. So that's why I made sure that I needed that. As far as one other thing I'll say, I do use quite a bit. I like working on cars and motorcycles and doing mechanical stuff. Vice grips are very important because, you got a nut or a bolt on this side, and, you can use a box end on this side, but a lot of times I'd rather just use a vice grip, and it just makes it, makes me able to hold things. So
sure. No, and that brings up an interesting point. I came across this this morning. Enhancing Skills for Life came out with a catalog of sorts. And it is upper limb specific at the moment. I don't know if they have something for lower limb, but it's essentially, it's a catalog of various devices that are out there to make everyday life simpler. Everything from jar openers to automatic toilet seats to, anything and everything. And it's like, I don't know, 15 pages long of different things that you can QR scan and get, which I think is fantastic. What I would like, hopefully, to see following that in a way is, now, how do you go about using these things as well? I think that's something that's needed. It's kind of parceled out there between a variety of people posting their own examples of how to do X, Y, Z. But I think that will be helpful from an organization like that as well. And the working out thing reminds me of, I worked with another user when I was at Brain Robotics, and he had lost his arm in combat. And he went to a trade show and saw another amputee there. And this young person felt like he could never work out again. And so, because that's what he had been told, give up, maybe do something else instead. And so this person that we had been working with took him to Home Depot and to what we have in the Northeast here, Dick's Sporting Goods. And he just got him basic stuff and showed him, here's how you can do these things. And the guy started crying. And it's just these basic tools that we forget exist to be able to help us. I mean, you literally wear a sock over a tube and you're able to lift weights and work out. And that works. It doesn't have to be super fancy. But Jonathan, what about yourself in terms of things that have been critically important and things that you do use on a daily basis, which eventually will segue to how long do you use a prosthesis for on a daily basis? And obviously it's different for all of you for a variety of reasons, but I'm curious, from the last number of years that you've had your iLim and other adaptive devices, which one is truly the go-to? And I don't think it speaks poorly of any one of them if you say one thing or another, because that's just the reality. And I think oftentimes as marketers, we paint one side, but not the rest.
Yeah, I think I wanted to go back to a previous point that was brought up about socket fit is everything. I mean, it doesn't matter what terminal device you have. If the socket fit isn't there, forget it. And I learned that the hard way. But no, I mean, I'm classed as they call me a super user, which I think is because of the hours in my hand. I travel extensively, and I'm always wearing my prosthesis. One of the things I would say, which is wonderful, is that the TSA have updated their scanning systems. So now, if you go through their scanner, because I elect to not go through the metal detector because I'm going to beat, so I go through the. And in the past, that would then result in me having a secondary check. They would use an ETD swab to test the device. But now, when I come out of the scanner, it says green, go. So they have updated their systems to recognize prosthesis, the components of prosthesis, etc. And as a result, my journey through security is a lot more seamless today than it used to be.
That's a game changer, especially for someone that travels a lot.
It's huge. And I mean, there is always, I speak to a lot of new users of devices, and that's often, there's an anxiety attached to going through an airport. All I want to say is, from an upper limb perspective, it's very seamless, and there's nothing to be concerned about. So for me, it's critical, even having the TSA pre-check as well, because obviously that expedites me, but I'm treated no differently to any other traveler. So I use my hand on a daily basis. When I do a deal, or I meet a new customer, or I meet with some of our clients, I obviously want to shake hands like a regular guy does. I don't want to use my left hand. I want to use my right hand. So sometimes it's a bit of a dance. You see the person look at me like, which hand do I shake? And I'm saying, well, normal people shake with right hands. So let's shake with right hands. I do have an adaptive device I use for the gym, which is here, of course.
Nice.
Of course. This specific device on the end here is so that I can do push-ups. And then I have a similar to Mike. So this is my device I clip on the end so I can lift weights and pull on, doing bench presses, etc. So I find that, COVID had a deep impact because I wasn't traveling as much. So, genuinely, I wasn't wearing my prosthesis as much. But now I'm back traveling, I'm using my prosthesis every day, without doubt. And fortunately, I do have a travel plug that I can travel with. And I do love it when I go to the airport and I go and sit at the boarding gate and plug myself in. Just love it, because I get lots of questions, lots of what am I doing? And I'm saying, well, I need energy. So that's what I'm doing.
Do you feel like you're using it more for travel because you feel like it allows you to fit in more, or because it helps you?
I think it's a bit of both, really. At the end of the day, I wear suits. I want to look whole, and I don't want my arm, my sleeve flapping in the wind. And it's a great conversation opener. I have to say, when I have meetings with new people, it definitely helps open the conversation. Often we lose track of what we're there for. So, but yeah, I do use my prosthesis daily, and I can't live without it. It's huge benefit to me.
That's great.
I'll just chime in. Just as a lower limb amputee, I use them from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. And with the feet, I do have different legs, if you will.
Sure.
It's not as easy to just switch out the foot apparatus with the socket. It's more the whole ensemble. So I have running blades, I have aqua legs, I have, and then I have everyday legs that I use. I wear shorts 365 days a year. And I do that because I think as an amputee, we have a bigger opportunity to change the total narrative within the disability community. Because obviously with a visible disability, it strikes up a lot of conversation and curiosity that gets to be explored. So I think it's, I do that. And plus I got some pretty cool legs. So show them off. And not only that, as a bilateral, I have the benefit of doing a little boost. I've got two sons that are over 6'1", and so I decided to join them from 5'11", and I'm now 6'1".
All the benefits.
There's lots of good things that come out of life post amputation.
Oh, absolutely. And Mike, this is a question for you. For those that can't see the questions that are coming in, we had someone ask that they'd be interested in knowing what level of physical therapy for lower limb and occupational therapy you engaged in, Mike. And how well the prosthetist and therapist work together as a team, because we hear often that it really is a team effort, and it has to be, or otherwise, things fall through the cracks and it's the user that is the one that is left in the dust. And what do you wish you could do with your current activities that you cannot with the devices that you have?
I'm not sure if that was for me. For lower limb.
Paul. Yeah. Did I say Mike? But you can all answer.
Yeah,
but I'll kick it off.
I think it's applicable to hear from everybody. But I was very fortunate in moving to Boston to undergo the surgery as part of a clinical study. That from a rehabilitation perspective, the OP, the occupational therapy, and the physical therapy were very well coordinated and aligned. And I think pre-amputation, my biggest fear was more on the occupational side of things, independent living, and how was I going to do this, and all those things. So I was very blessed that I got great, and it's very, very important. And then it moved more heavily into the physical therapy as my residual limbs healed, and I got into my first prosthetics devices. And in that, physical therapy became very important, from gait, from movement, from even I had to learn how to get up off the ground, right?
Right.
It's a different ball game. So I think that is kind of mission critical, if you will, in those early days and early times, is that the physical therapy and the occupational therapy are coordinated, because at the end of the day, it is mind over matter, right? So if you're at peace and comfortable and confident in a mindset wise, the physical part will play out.
Sure. Yeah.
And
No.
I have to answer the question of what I wish I could do that I currently that I haven't been able to do. I can just say unequivocally that I'm living a more adventurous, fulfilling life than I was as a biological with my biological limbs. So
Yeah.
And I think that could be the outcome, and that's part of what we're doing with Disabled Life Alliance, which is the public benefit corp that I started. We're trying to make standard of care and outcomes be that optimal. There's no reason they shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, and we'll touch on that with your involvement with the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry as well, and the important tasks that they have ahead of them that they're a part of. Mike and Jonathan, OT and PT, and how much involvement have those two functions been in your various journeys, and what are some of the things that have helped from that standpoint, if they have?
Mike, you go ahead.
I don't know if I have much of a journey in that, just because being born like this, it was really, my mom didn't have Google to research or YouTube to look at. It was pretty much just, I'm going to figure this out. And she's the one who taught me how to use the prosthetic back in the day. As far as everything else, it's really just been a journey that I don't want to say I'm on an island, but I do feel alone to a certain extent. I don't mind it. I mean, I like I said, from the beginning, I like having one hand. I have no problem with it at all. But I don't go anywhere or do anything. I don't reach out as far as that is concerned. As far as physical therapy for me, I work out, I play basketball, I play golf. I bowl every once in a while. I retired 30 years ago from the tour, but I threw a shot the other day and I got a strike, so I felt pretty good.
Oh, there you go. That's
maybe I'll go on the senior tour. But I really, as far as that, I don't really do anything other than try to stay in shape. That's I don't have anything I can add, so I apologize for that.
But no, I don't think you should. I mean, I think for those that perhaps are just starting this journey on your end of things, that they have now just learned, like my father said, that somebody he knows at work, they just found out that their child that they're pregnant with is missing a few fingers. And so I said, he'll be fine. There's a Lucky Finn project organization, have them get in touch with them. So I think it's still a very important thing to share that your mom was your best, your biggest advocate and supporter and teacher, and you are fine, and you're finding different ways to do things, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And while I can share my own story, I did meet someone within the last year who was born just like me, and her story was completely different than mine. As she was growing up, and really, other than she had a little bit more of a pinky, exactly like me. Her parents would cover her up when she was a baby. They were ashamed of her. She was bullied in every class you can imagine in school, which led to depression as an adult. She had problems getting jobs. So there is the other side, and I feel bad for that, and I was glad I was able to talk with her and speak with her, as now she's a woman now and doing well, but still having to overcome those things. So I always like to represent that too, that I am very blessed that my parents raised me the way they did. And there is another side to the congenital, could be very brutal for others. And, it's unfortunate, but,
it may not be OTs and PTs, but it really depends on the support network that you have around you. Jonathan, anything to add on the OT end of things?
Well, I think that certainly my journey was not as seamless as I had hoped. I felt that I actually speak at a college here in Los Angeles where they bring on new OTs. So I have an opportunity to have them ask me all the questions that they probably won't be able to ask every patient. So it gives them that opportunity to be confident in asking questions with somebody who's, very willing to share experience. And I think for me, it was like the triangle without one side. I had an amazing surgeon, a fabulous prosthetist, but the OT was missing, so that the triangle collapsed, basically. I think that often is forgotten, and I think that obviously physical training plays a big part as well, depending on your situation. But the OT side, I just felt I got my prosthesis and that was it. It was like, what do I do now? I was fortunate. I did find a great OT in Orange County, and so I use that story about the fact it needs to be that engagement between the three different areas, all three talking about the best outcome for that patient. For me initially, but subsequently I've been quite lucky. And the thing is, you need to embrace this limb difference. I have always felt that listening to Mike's story about the young lady who her parents hid her. I hid my limb initially. I wore a sling. I wanted to walk around. I didn't want people to ask questions. And then it was one day I was in on holiday with my family, and this very well-known amputee, he lost his leg and an arm in war, and I think it was in Iraq. And he actually gave me a call and told me about be proud of your difference. And the next day I bought t-shirts and I started walking around with my limb. And as I live in Hollywood, I've taken full advantage of it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many shows and movies I've been in as a veteran, because that's usually the role. But also had a wonderful opportunity with a movie called Notorious Nick. And I don't know if everybody knows that, but there was a very well-known MMA fighter who had one hand, or has one hand, should I say. And I had the opportunity of being in that movie, and it was really focused on limb loss. It was a fantastic experience, but I felt very proud to be able to do what I had there. But it's about embracing that difference and not being, scared to show it off. And I certainly now don't have any issue with that. That's for sure.
And I think a lot of the dialogue has also changed in the last not even 5 years, that there is a lot more awareness and a lot more acceptance. Because I know when I walked into my first day at Touch Bionics 8 years ago, I didn't even know this was a real thing. I had no clue what to expect. And you have this technology that is was so beyond my comprehension. But things have definitely come a long way in those 8 years. Before we wrap up, I know I always schedule these for a half hour and the conversations are always too good to just end on the nose. But I want to give you guys each a moment to just share anything that you think we didn't touch on or you feel like is important to share, whatever that is. And I know we mentioned the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry, Paul. Any nuggets, any last parting thoughts that you want to make sure that whoever, maybe whether it be a clinician or somebody entering the field or a user that's listening in, something to get them to notice and think about and consider? Paul, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah.
Hollywood Square.
Yeah, no problem. Just echoing Mike and John's, commentary that to celebrate the differences, right? If we celebrate differences on a limb basis, just think what society can do in general, right? It's a bigger narrative, right? And I think you're spot on, Linda, that the not only the pace of things changed, but the cadence of that awareness and the change resulting from it is happening. I've been blessed. I've 4 years, just under 4 years, an amputee, and it's been remarkably positive growth since then. And things like you mentioned, the limb loss registry, that's a really important effort, because the data makes informed decisions. And for us to move the O&P community towards the registry and the manufacturers and us end users and patient outcomes, I think there's over 1 million patient outcome reports in there. It's just going to help. And it's going to help the entire industry. It's going to help the clinicians do their job. I too have been blessed from a clinician perspective that they are very passionate, and they're thirsty for knowledge and for staying up to date and up to speed. And you as the amputee need to do the same.
Yeah. Mike, any thoughts or parting jokes or anything you want to share?
Well, I'll share one thing. You're talking about how far things have come within the last few years, and I agree with you. And I have probably a really good case in point. So I think we established I have one hand, and I was very fortunate to be a child actor back in the day, and even on the professional bowlers tour. But when they cast somebody to play the role of Kingpin, they cast Woody Harrelson. I didn't even get a call, so I don't know what's going on with that, but that's fine. So I'll just leave you with that. That's how far things have come.
Yeah. Jonathan.
So I think for me, you've got to remember that it's our own individual journey, and I get calls from people who say, so what do you recommend? And obviously I'm not going to recommend anything. I'll share my story. I'll tell you what happened to me, and that's related to the cancer I had, and also the obviously the amputation and prosthesis. I get often asked, do you think I should amputate my hand because I have the same cancer? I obviously am not going to make any recommendations at all. Your own journey. I think the other thing that's really important is I work with the Amputee Coalition. I act as I get calls from other amputees or people who are about to have amputations, because people want to know that there is hope, and I think that's the most key word here is there is hope. You're looking at 3 people here who have all been very successful, who this hasn't stopped them. If anything, as I keep hearing, and that's the same for me, I have had opportunities that I would never have had with 2 regular hands. And so I've met some amazing people, including yourself, Linda. And I think it's just, I've had so many opportunities. And, the old question of if you could go back in time, would you change anything? I absolutely would not. I'm here. This is me. And this is what I am. So,
which I think is powerful, because I think, as you also shared earlier, that when you're in that moment, you think, oh my God, it's all over. How am I going to move on? And hindsight is always 20/20. And you now know that, no matter what setbacks you have, there's always a reason, and there's always a sunnier side after that kind of initial shock of things. But I want to thank you all for joining me today. I think there was a lot that we discussed. There's always more that can be talked about. There's always additional conversations and nuances that can be discussed. So you can link in and find any of these great gentlemen on the variety of social platforms that are out there. Connect with them for, just for the sake of connecting and feeling like you're not alone. There's a huge community of people that are rallying behind everybody. And just one last housekeeping thing is our next webinar is May 8th, and that'll be with Giovanni Sapatori from Bion IT Labs, and he'll be sharing more about the Adams Hand, which is another myoelectric prosthetic device that's coming on the market and was recently launched. And they'll be going to OT World. So come hang out again, learn something new, ask questions. Let's, continue to have these open conversations. And guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. Okay.